Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. Authorities identify the 2 children killed in the horrific Minneapolis school shooting as investigators continue to uncover disturbing details about the gunman.
The White House responds to the tragedy with Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt defending the power of prayer, plus new numbers on the D.C. crime crackdowns and a warning for Chicago.
President Trump is ordering a review of taxpayer grants and rolling out sweeping new executive orders. From government architecture to federal unions, what Trump's latest orders aim to do.
Russian strikes in Kyiv hit the EU delegation's headquarters, but Ukraine says it's ready to mass produce a missile that could hit back at Moscow and beyond.
Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook is taking President Trump to court, fighting his attempt to fire her. A judge in Washington will hear the case today.
New research indicates there could be another way to minimize the risk of cancer. We'll speak with a survivor and healthcare provider for analysis.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. On the eve of a holiday weekend, but a lot of news to get through this morning.
Certainly good to have you with us on NTD Good Morning this morning, but we do have some news to start with. Breaking news. The Israeli military recovered the remains of 2 hostages from Gaza today. That's according to the Prime Minister's office.
One of the hostages was identified as 56-year-old Ilan Weiss. His wife and daughter were also taken hostage on October 7th, but released in November of 23.
The second hostage is still unidentified. This leaves 48 hostages still remaining in Gaza, but Israeli authorities believe only about 20 are still alive. We'll keep you updated on that. A Minneapolis community is in mourning after those 2 young children were killed in that mass shooting at a Catholic school. Families are remembering the 10-year-old Harper Moisky and 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel for their joy and kindness, even as loved ones struggle with unimaginable loss.
NTD's Daniel Monahan has the reactions of family members and the latest on the investigation.
10-year-old Harper Moisky's family confirmed Thursday she was killed when a shooter opened fire on praying Catholic school students in Minneapolis. Harper's parents said she was a bright, joyful child whose kindness and spirit touched everyone who knew her. The second victim killed in the shooting was identified as 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel. His father, Jesse Merkel, said a coward decided to take their 8-year-old son away from them.
Because of their actions, we will never be allowed to hold him, talk to him, play with him.
The grieving father asked people to remember Fletcher for the person he was and not the act that ended his life.
Fletcher loved his family, friends, fishing, cooking, and any sport that he was allowed to play.
And said he hopes in time his family will find healing.
Give your kids an extra hug and kiss today. We love you, Fletcher. You'll always be with us.
The children were both killed while sitting in the pews as other students dove to the ground to take cover. Shooter Robin Westman fired 116 rifle rounds and attempted to fire a shot from a handgun, but it backfired. Police say he then turned the gun on himself before the police could reach him. Mary Grace Westman, the shooter's mother, worked at the Church of Annunciation before retiring. She is not cooperating with investigators and has hired a criminal defense attorney. Authorities say an alleged video manifesto was scheduled to be published on YouTube following the shooting.
More than anything, the shooter wanted to kill children, defenseless children.
Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara said the children could not see the shooter.
He was standing outside of the building, firing through very narrow church windows on the level where they would line up with the pews.
A simple measure may have prevented a higher death toll.
Annunciation Church had a practice that once Mass began, they locked the doors of the church. This incident occurred shortly after the Mass was beginning.
Hennepin EMS Chief Martin Shearer says there's been a lot of unrecognized heroes in the event.
The children that were protecting other children, which is really amazing to hear about. I might be saying too much, but we had one kid that covered up another kid and took a shotgun blast to his back and things like that.
Mourners gathered on Thursday at a church to pray for the victims of the shooting, and memorials now decorate the site of the deadly incident. Minnesota Democrats called for action on gun control on Thursday.
We need a statewide and a federal ban on assault weapons.
This is something that is simple. A simple ban to make sure people who should not have access to these weapons do not get them.
Vice President J.D. Vance says America has a mental health crisis.
We take way more psychiatric medication than any other nation on earth, and I think it's time for us to start asking some very hard questions about the root causes of this violence.
Authorities say 9 victims of the shooting are being cared for at the hospital. 1 child is still in critical condition. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And federal law enforcement officials say they stopped a potential school shooting in Washington, D.C. The ATF says it worked with Washington, D.C. Transit Police to make an arrest on Wednesday. That's the same day as the school shooting at a Catholic grade school in Minneapolis that we've just been hearing about. They did not release the name of this suspect, but it is known to be a juvenile who allegedly made a threat against a public D.C. school on social media. Investigators recovered 7 firearms at the residence where the arrest was made. D.C. Public Schools says it's not tracking any students that have been apprehended in the incident. The White House responding to the school shooting in Minnesota. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt leans into the power of prayer while highlighting the administration's push for crime reduction and support for American labor. NTD's Maria Otsu has more from the White House.
President Trump and the First Lady encouraged the entire nation to join all of us in praying for the victims and their families as they face unimaginable grief and loss.
The White House responding to the Minnesota school shooting that took the lives of an 8- and a 10-year-old.
In a time of mourning like this, it's utterly disrespectful to deride the power of prayer in this country, and it's disrespectful to the millions of Americans of faith.
As Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt is defending the power of prayer, the FBI is currently investigating the shooting as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics. Press Secretary Leavitt tells NTD's Iris Tao that the administration is focused on removing public safety threats from our communities.
Iris.
Thank you, Caroline. 2 questions on the shooting. What's the administration's message to some concerned parents across the country who might be now worried about their kids' safety in light of the latest incident?
We completely and totally understand the concerns of parents across the country. This tragedy it's heartbreaking. As a parent myself, there are no words to describe just the heartbreak that these families must be enduring.
Meanwhile, Press Secretary Leavitt is touting the lower D.C. crime numbers. As the White House is doubling down on its stance on crime, it is now bringing its attention to Chicago, criticizing local officials for ignoring the problem.
To Americans in Democrat-run cities nationwide, decline is a choice. You don't have to live in constant fear of being robbed, raped, or murdered. Your leaders are lying to you, and they have been failing you for decades.
Leavitt says that for 13 years, Chicago has had the most murders of any U.S. city. And as Labor Day approaches on Monday, the White House is touting that nearly $10 trillion in investments is being brought into America.
For decades, the hardworking men and women of our country who built the greatest nation in world history were sold out by selfish, greedy, short-sighted globalists who put our country on a path to economic and cultural ruin. This national disgrace is over, and the dignity of American labor is being defended.
The White House says that since President Trump took office, the economy has added nearly 500,000 jobs to the workforce, and that the average taxpayer can expect a nearly $4,000 tax cut. Reporting from the White House, Maria Otsu, NTD News.
And President Trump is set to address the General Assembly of the United Nations next month.
The White House confirmed yesterday that Trump will travel to New York to take part in the 80th General Assembly on September 23rd.
This will be his 5th address to the international body and the first one of his 2nd term.
During his past addresses, Trump has focused on North Korea, Iran, China tariffs, and illegal immigration. And President Trump moving to reshape federal policy on several fronts this week. He's ordered an investigation into politically motivated federal grants and signed executive orders on government architecture and federal labor unions. Here are the details.
President Trump has directed federal agencies to investigate whether taxpayer money has been misused for partisan political activities and lobbying. The White House says some existing grants had highly political overtones, including funding for LGBT teen programs and initiatives for, quote, advancing racial justice in elementary mathematics. In a memorandum Thursday, Trump wrote, in addition to being a wasteful, abusive, and potentially fraudulent use of the American people's money, the possible use of federal grants as slush funds for political and legislative advocacy raises serious legal concerns. The president also moved to standardize federal buildings, signing an executive order requiring classical architecture as the default style for new government projects. According to the order, public buildings should uplift and beautify public spaces and command respect from the general public. Trump's directive restores a style he says is rooted in the vision of Washington and Jefferson. It rejects brutalist and modernist designs that, according to Trump, many Americans find unappealing. And in another executive order, Trump acted to end collective bargaining for federal unions at certain agencies tied to national security. The order is directed at agencies like NASA, the National Weather Service, the Patent and Trademark Office, and hydropower facilities managed by the Bureau of Reclamation. The White House says the order is designed to ensure national security agencies can operate without delay.
And President Trump is ending a long-standing tariff exemption, hitting billions of small packages with new import taxes.
Starting today, all shipments valued under $800 will be subject to duties, taxes, and fees, closing the so-called de minimis loophole that's been in place since 1938.
Officials say the move will help curb drug trafficking, piracy, and counterfeit goods while generating billions in new revenue.
White House trade advisor Peter Navarro said closing the loophole will save American lives and add up to $10 billion a year in tariff revenues.
In 2015, the exemption was raised from $200 to $800. Since then, and after Trump's first-term tariffs, customs data showed packages claiming de minimis exemption skyrocketed from 139 million to more than 1.3 billion in 2024, many from fast fashion platforms like Shein and Temu.
The administration stresses this change is permanent with no chance for reversal.
The Trump administration has approved an over $800 million arms sale to Ukraine. The State Department says the package includes more than 3,000 extended-range missiles, GPS systems, and support equipment. The department says funding will come from NATO allies, including Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, along with U.S. foreign military financing. The announcement came yesterday after Russia launched a massive air attack on Kyiv. Ukraine says at least 23 people were killed and dozens more wounded. European officials say diplomatic offices were damaged in the strikes, prompting an emergency meeting at the United Nations today. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has more on that story.
Rescue operations continued throughout the day in Kyiv after Russian drones and missiles struck 33 locations in all of the 10 districts of the Ukrainian capital. The strikes hit exclusively civilian infrastructure, with damage reported at the European Union delegation headquarters and the British delegation offices in Kyiv.
This attack is one of the examples of Russian. Russian country is terrorist country. Destroyed civilians, killed civilians.
The president of the European Commission expressed outrage and highlighted that the peace talks with the Russian government have not deterred Vladimir Putin from his objectives in Ukraine.
Last night's attack struck in close proximity of the diplomatic mission, the representation of our union. 2 missiles hit in a distance of 50 meters of the delegation within 20 seconds. And this is another grim reminder of what is at stake.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte stressed that the U.S. and its allies should not be naive about what the Russian government is capable and will do to reach a settlement to the war in Ukraine that is to Vladimir Putin's advantage.
And now we are working on the security guarantees. President Trump is trying to get Zelensky and Putin together at the table. But I think last night is evidence, again, that Russia is capable of a lot, is willing to do whatever they think is necessary to bring the war into a situation of their advantage, but they will not be successful because we will keep supporting Ukraine and we will do everything to end this war under Trump's leadership.
The Ukrainian government unveiled this week a new domestically produced long-range missile dubbed the Flamingo. The missile has a range of 3,000 kilometers and can deliver twice the payload of the powerful Tomahawk missile. The Flamingo missile could be a game changer in war and in peacetime for Ukraine. President Zelensky expects the country to be producing more than 200 of these missiles per month by the end of the year. And since it's domestically produced, it has no Western limitations to its use and can be used to hit Moscow and even beyond, even the Russian fleet in the Barents Sea. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
France, Germany, and the UK, or E3, are moving to potentially reimpose United Nations sanctions on Iran.
They're urging Iran to return to the table after months of stalled diplomacy over Iran's nuclear program.
For years, we as the E3 have repeatedly sought dialogue and worked towards a joint diplomatic solution. Iran has never taken this outstretched hand, not even when we recently offered an extension.
The sanctions snapback mechanism gives Iran 30 days to recommit to nuclear limits set under its 2015 deal. If not, UN penalties lifted in 2015 would return freezing assets, halting arms sales, and restricting its missile program.
The three European powers acted after recent talks failed, accusing Tehran of violating its nuclear commitments. Tehran has criticized the move as harmful to diplomacy.
Up ahead, the Chinese Communist Party plans a grand military parade to commemorate the end of World War II, despite having not fought in that war.
We're going to speak to an Asian Studies policy advisor for analysis.
And Lisa Cook is suing to keep her seat on the Federal Reserve Board after President Trump moved to fire her. The fight heads to court today. The facts behind the headlines after this break.
Say goodbye to harsh, bitter coffee and hello to a delicious, smooth brew. With specialty quality beans, expertly roasted in-house, you'll taste the difference with every sip. Fermented with a blend of 50 enzymes, Days Coffee delivers a rich brew like no other. Made with the highest grade specialty beans available, you're sure to taste the difference. Elevate your morning with Days Enzyme Fermented Coffee.
What if you could whiten your teeth by simply brushing your teeth? Now you can with Smile Actives, the teeth whitening breakthrough that safely gets your teeth white and keeps them white every day, just by brushing your teeth.
I never thought that whitening my teeth could be so easy. I just put the gel on the brush, the toothpaste on it, brush, and I can see my white teeth.
Simply add Smile Actives to any toothpaste and our patented PolyClean technology activates into a powerful microfoam that penetrates into the enamel surface to safely lift and remove stains.
You need a simple way to whiten your teeth. Without strips, without trays, without going to the dentist. And it was about time that a product was developed that you would be able to do that with just brushing.
And now Smile Actives is even better with new Pro Whitening Gel with 33% greater whitening power, clinically shown to whiten teeth faster, up to 8 shades. 100% of users saw whiter teeth. On food stains, coffee and wine stains, even on veneers, crowns, and dentures.
I eat the blueberries, I drink the coffee, and I know that Smile Actives will keep my teeth white every day.
If you could use something so easy like Smile Actives to take yellow teeth to white teeth, why wouldn't you?
Why spend hundreds of dollars for whitening treatments at the dentist when now you can whiten your teeth with new Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel every time you brush your teeth? Call or go to smileactives.com and for a limited time get new Pro Whitening Gel for just $24.95. Order in the next 5 minutes and buy one get one absolutely free for just $24.95. That's 2 for 1 and save 58%. We'll even include free shipping. Get your teeth whiter guaranteed or return it within 60 days for your money back.
I smile every day now.
The difference is literally night and day.
So now I'm always smiling, always choosing, because now my teeth are much whiter.
This offer is not available in stores, so call or click now before the special buy one get one free offer goes away.
What I thought was a complete life was nowhere near complete. But it is now.
Learn about adopting a teen at adoptuskids.org.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said yesterday that there was a lot of trouble at the CDC. The comments came a day after CDC Director Susan Menarez was fired.
I would say this, that first of all, I will confirm that we let go Susan Menarez yesterday. I'm not going to talk about personnel issues, but the CDC is an agency that is very troubled for a very long time, and anybody who lived through the COVID pandemic and saw all of these bizarre recommendations that were not science-based, all the misinformation, understands that the CDC has on its website today that among the top 10 medical innovations, greatest medical accomplishments in history was abortion. This is one of the greatest medical accomplishments because it keeps small families. Go to the website, look at it. Fluoridation, giving kids a toxin, and vaccines. So there's a lot of trouble at CDC, and it's going to require getting rid of some people over the long term in order for us to change the institutional culture.
Kennedy was speaking at a news conference in Texas alongside Governor Greg Abbott. Several top officials at the CDC stepped down following the ouster of Susan Menarez as director. One is Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis, director of the agency's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases. He said recent policy and material proposals do not reflect scientific reality.
Daskalakis says the move was motivated in part by the removal of COVID-19 vaccines from immunization schedules for healthy children and pregnant women. The CDC's chief medical officer, Deborah Uri, is also exiting. She said Menarez's attempts to be transparent, including posting documents for public comment, had been blocked.
Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook has filed a lawsuit to block President Trump's attempt to fire her. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. will hear Cook's bid today. She's arguing the president lacks legal authority to remove a Fed governor without cause. Trump has accused Cook of mortgage fraud tied to home loans she obtained in 2021 before her appointment to the Federal Reserve. Her lawyers say the allegations are baseless and argue they do not amount to sufficient cause for dismissal. The lawsuit also accuses Trump of violating Cook's right to due process under the Constitution by firing her without notice or a hearing. Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte first raised the allegations. He noted that Cook has not denied the mortgage documents in question are hers. And as President Trump considers whether to deploy the National Guard in Chicago, Homeland Security has asked a nearby military base for limited support. Meanwhile, a judge in Florida has approved the closure of Alligator Alcatraz. NTD's Arlene Richards has the latest.
This whole story on crime is incredible that the Democrats wouldn't be with us.
As President Trump touts his success in deploying the National Guard to address crime in D.C., he's been hinting at sending more troops to Chicago. But Illinois Governor Pritzker has said no thank you. Now, the Department of Homeland Security has asked a naval base 35 miles outside of Chicago for help, which may be a clue of future law enforcement presence to come. Matt Mogul, a spokesperson for Naval Base Great Lakes, told CNN that the department asked for limited support in the form of facilities, infrastructure, and other logistical needs to support DHS operations. In the weeks after the administration deployed National Guard troops to D.C. streets, he's been calling for sending troops to other crime-ridden cities like Chicago, Baltimore, and New York. In light of the Illinois governor's objections, President Trump has been hedging on sending troops in without a request from Pritzker. Border czar Tom Homan says there's still a crime problem.
Chicago still has a crime problem. So President Trump, again, made a promise to American people, we'll make this country safe again. So Chicago has a crime problem. That's why President Trump's thinking about it.
Last week, some Chicago residents said they would welcome reinforcements.
It's no law and order. I mean, if you got the National Guard right there, are you going to rob somebody right there in front of the National Guards? No, you're not.
Details about the administration's plans for Chicago are still unclear. Over in Florida, the administration is battling losses over the operation of Alligator Alcatraz. The immigration detention facility in the Florida Everglades is closing down after a federal judge late Wednesday denied requests to pause her order to wind down operations at the facility. Detainees had reported unsanitary conditions and being cut off from the legal system. The White House responded to the judge's decision on Thursday.
We know that what this administration is doing with respect to all policy, but also immigration policy, is above the books, and we're abiding by our nation's immigration laws. And we think it's despicable that an activist judge has inserted themselves in this migrant detention facility to the point where DHS is now having to relocate these illegal immigrants.
The judge has given them until late October to completely shut down the facility. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The FBI says a Chinese regime-linked hacking campaign has hit more than 200 American firms across 80 countries. And the Defense Department is now investigating Microsoft for hiring China-based coders for U.S. military projects. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the story.
Beijing's indiscriminate targeting of private communications demands our stronger collaboration with partners to identify and counter this activity at the earliest stages.
23 defense and intelligence agencies from the U.S. and around the world are laying out the Chinese Communist Party's playbook in hacking telecommunications companies. Chinese state-sponsored hackers spied on calls and text messages of millions of Americans since at least 2019. They also targeted several government officials like President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. This hacking campaign is widely known as Salt Typhoon. The FBI now says that the hackers breached over 80 countries.
These actors conducted a significant cyber espionage campaign, breaching global telecommunications privacy and security norms.
In another development, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the Pentagon is now investigating Microsoft after learning that the company was using coders in China to provide tech support to the U.S. military. It was a program that was called Digital Escorts. Hegseth called this a breach of trust and a threat to the U.S. military's cybersecurity, which has been going on for nearly a decade.
Did they put anything in the code that we didn't know about? We're going to find out. Additionally, all Department of Defense software vendors will identify and terminate any Chinese involvement in DoD systems. It blows my mind that I'm even saying these things. It's such common sense that we ever allowed it to happen.
Microsoft is a major contractor of the U.S. government, and they said last month that they'd stop employing China-based workers for U.S. military projects. And in another development, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill on Wednesday that bans nationals from certain countries from buying land in Texas. The new law applies to people and companies from countries that the federal government deems a national security threat, like China and Iran.
SB 17 is the strongest law in the United States to prohibit foreign adversaries from buying land in our great state.
Abbott signed 2 more bills targeting foreign adversaries, one criminalizing transnational repression or intimidation, and another prohibiting sister city agreements with those countries. Other states and the federal government are working to take similar action on the land purchase ban. Their concern is that the Chinese Communist Party is directing its companies to purchase farmland to gain control of the U.S. domestic food supply and set up shop for espionage near sensitive military sites.
The Chinese owning of farmland in our country is a massive national security issue, and for the media, you can see the yellow is where all of the farms have been purchased over the last number of years, and the red is around all of the military bases.
And this issue has been a concern for years, and it's bipartisan. Last year, the Biden administration, by executive action, stopped a large Chinese land purchase near a U.S. military base. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Thanks to Jack for that report. Staying with China's influence, the Chinese regime is holding a military parade in Beijing, hosting 26 foreign heads of state and governments on September 3rd. The event will mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. Among the guests scheduled to attend is North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Joining us to discuss is Yuichiro Kokotani, policy advisor at the Heritage Foundation's Asia Studies Center. Thank you for joining us this morning. What do you make of the event?
I think this is another evidence that China is shoring up ties with a lot of America's enemies. You know, North Korea is one of them. Obviously, Iran's going to be there. Russia's going to be there. I think this is just another evidence that, you know, as the United States takes a more confrontational approach with the Chinese, China's trying to shore up its friendship with countries like North Korea that has always been its traditional friends. And especially as last year, relations with North Korea are a bit more rocky, but right now, China sees that we have to rebuild these sort of relationships, and I think that's what you're seeing with this sort of rapprochement.
Now, critics of the CCP are citing revisionist history, something that communist regimes are known for, in its claims of defeating Japan. Obviously, the Japanese were ousted out of China, but not necessarily by the communists. They were in a civil war, right, with the nationalists who eventually fled to Taiwan. So can you break down sort of what actually happened and how they're sort of leveraging this historical fact sort of in a I guess untrue sort of way?
Absolutely. I think there's going to be a lot of distortion at this sort of military parade that's going to present the Chinese Communist Party as the primary and perhaps even only savior of China from the Japanese invasion. And of course, that wasn't actually the case, right? The nationalist Chinese that government that ultimately had to flee to Taiwan was the one that bled the most and fought and had the most troops mobilized to fight against the Japanese invaders. And even during the middle of the Japanese invasion, the Chinese Communist troops were starting to fight against the nationalists and vice versa in the middle of a Japanese invasion. So if anything, the Chinese Communist Party oftentimes were sabotaging the war effort. That's not to say there weren't a few contributions from communist troops against the Japanese invasion, but really it's a distortion to place the CCP as a primary center of that effort.
Yeah, and this is one of the tactics that communist regimes use in distorting the truth. Are there any other examples that come to mind of the CCP sort of either distorting truth or revising history as it seeks to maintain its legitimacy for not being elected in its rule?
Absolutely. I mean, the historical revisionism is a core tactic of the CCP to justify its rules and its geopolitical ambitions and its human rights abuses, right? I mean, you're seeing that especially with the, the 9-dash line. China's very expansive and illegal. International courts have said it's illegal. Claims in the South China Sea, which it says is based off of their historical claims to the land. It's completely in flagrant violation of international norms and laws. And but they say they've always had this, so this is going to be their own. Same thing with Taiwan. They kind of have this all historical narrative that this, Taiwan has always been part of China, has always been an integral part of China, and there is no way for China to be a full and completely rejuvenated nation unless Taiwan is forcefully brought back into the fold. And so, these aren't just historical debates. It has a real ramification on politics.
Now, others included on this guest list of dozens of heads of state includes Kim Jong-un. What does welcoming him sort of signify in your view?
I mean, I think it signifies that ultimately, China can talk sweet words to the United States and they'll keep on, and its allies, and say, oh, we come to you in friendship. But really, their true friends are countries like North Korea, that it has had a defense treaty for more than 75 years, and countries like Russia, countries like Iran. These are countries that the United States and any American would understand to be adversaries of the United States, and yet these are the countries that China is courting to come to its military parade, and I think that sends a message, and I think the message should be received by Americans.
And as we finish up, in our last story, we showed a map where China has been buying U.S. farmland. They've done a significant amount, both sort of under the radar as well as very openly, about trying to improve their influence in the West, whether that be the Belt and Road Initiative or giving money to prestigious universities. In particular, for this event, the Slovak leader, the only NATO and EU member, is also attending. In your view, does that signify anything, and does it show sort of the way that China looks to build bridges in the West while also, trying to export their sort of transnational repression?
Look, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on Slovak politics and know what went into that. What, in my belief, a wrong decision to try to legitimize this event by going. But ultimately, I think this is where America needs to lead through example and lead through strength, and just really set a firm down with our NATO allies that these aren't just neutral events to commemorate historical occasions. These are revisionist propaganda events, and really, if you're an American friend, you really shouldn't try to legitimize these sort of events and commemorations through your attendance. So, I think that's something that America needs to continue to message to our friends and allies, and seems like we've gotten through, except for Slovakia.
And just as we finish up in our last 30 seconds, you had mentioned they try to use these events to legitimize their, their place on the world stage. What specific things do they do at this type of an event? Do they, make media narratives? How does that operation actually work?
I mean, of course, it's a highly choreographed event, right? There's going to be a lot of pomp and circumstance. Everyone going to doing the goose step. There's going to be a lot of tanks, a lot of advanced capabilities. Especially within the military domain, there's going to be a lot of people watching to see what kind of new capabilities China is going to try to flex. Because obviously, this is going to be also an an opportunity for military intimidation by China showing off new capabilities it has that might be able to use against the United States and her friends. So, this is just that sort of, also an opportunity for that sort of military show of force against us and our friends. So we have to be mindful of that too.
We appreciate your insights this morning. Ichiro Kakutani. Have a great holiday weekend.
Thank you.
Still to come, 3 former officers will face new federal trials in the Tyre Nichols case.
A judge found possible bias in the original proceedings after private communications with prosecutors were revealed.
The FDA has recalled frozen shrimp that may contain a harmful substance that gives off radiation. Be sure to stick around for that after this break.
Being a cowboy, I don't know anything different from when I was 3 or 4 years old. I did tough things. I thought everybody needed to do tough things, and if you didn't, I didn't have time for it. I had a very successful career at a very young age, and life was fast. I was preparing physically. I wasn't doing anything mentally on the inside. And then I got hurt. I wanted to be better as a person, and I really dug into mental health. I start my day with 20-minute workouts. I live life 8 seconds at a time. Horses are so therapeutic. They know what you're feeling. When you're nervous, they're nervous. You won't say it back, but we're pals. I take a lot of responsibility in taking care of my kids, my family, being there for them. You're gonna have tough days. Everybody does. Find a place to stop and just breathe. Love your mind.
That first time seeing my son, I feel like my life did a 180. I was already trying to change my perspective of life and really just be a father figure that I never had. Being present is the most important part. I'm still growing every day, becoming a better version of myself, to be the better mirror for my son. I mean, he's just growing. He's becoming his own person. Man, at first I saw him dance, bro, he brings the vibes, you know what I'm saying? He brings the party no matter what. He really a definition of like why he loves somebody. And I love him to the death of me.
We said we'd never give in to a meltdown.
Okay.
And we'd never babysit with a screen. We said we'd never let the toys take over.
Mariella!
Never leave the house looking, well, and never let them out of our sight.
Skylar, come here.
Cars get hot fast, and kids can be at risk. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Kerry Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. Minneapolis community continues to grieve after 2 young children were killed in a shooting at a Catholic school. The 10-year-old Harper Moisky and 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel were remembered by their families as joyful and kind, Authorities are investigating an alleged manifesto and videos left behind by the shooter. Meanwhile, Minnesota Democrats are calling for gun control. President Trump is ordering agencies to investigate whether taxpayer grants have been misused for partisan causes, including programs for LGBT teens and racial justice in education. He also signed an order making classical architecture the default style for new federal buildings, and another targeting collective bargaining for unions and national security agencies such as NASA and the Patent Office. And staying with the Trump administration, they've approved an $825 million arms sale to Ukraine yesterday. The State Department says the package includes more than 3,000 extended-range missiles, GPS systems, and support equipment. This is after Russia launched a massive air attack on Kyiv yesterday, which Ukraine says killed at least 23 people and dozens more wounded. European officials say diplomatic offices were damaged in the strikes, prompting an emergency meeting at the UN today. And the Federal Reserve Governor, Lisa Cook, is suing to block President Trump's attempt to fire her. A federal judge in Washington will hear the case today. Cook argues a president cannot remove a Fed governor without cause. Trump says there is cause, alleged mortgage fraud tied to 2021 home loans. But Cook's lawyers say the claims are baseless and don't meet the legal threshold for dismissal. The lawsuit also alleges Trump violated her due process rights. Those are our top headlines this Friday morning. And with that, over to you, Steph.
Thank you, Carrie. And next, a man accused of throwing a sandwich at a federal agent in Washington is now facing a lesser charge. Former Justice Department employee Sean Dunn was arrested earlier this month after the incident was caught on video. Dunn was initially charged with felony assault, but a grand jury declined to indict. Prosecutors have now reduced the case to a misdemeanor assault against a federal officer. Attorney General Pam Bondi says Dunn was fired from the DOJ after his arrest. Bondi said conduct like Dunn's would not be tolerated, calling the case an example of the so-called deep state inside the department. And a judge ordered a new trial yesterday for 3 former Memphis police officers who were convicted of federal charges in the fatal beating of Tyre Nichols. She ordered the new trials after finding that another judge held communications with federal prosecutors without defense lawyers present, giving the appearance of possible bias. The ruling is the latest setback for prosecutors. The same 3 officers who have been granted a new federal trial were acquitted of second-degree murder and all other charges in a state trial earlier this year. The case drew national attention after videos showed officers violently kicking and punching Nichols during a traffic stop. Nichols died in a hospital 3 days later. Demetrius Haley was convicted last year of 2 counts of civil rights violation and 2 counts of witness tampering in the federal case, while Tadarius Bean and Justin Smith were each convicted of 1 count of witness tampering. The other 2 officers who were charged in the cases had pleaded guilty and were excluded from yesterday's ruling. And about 780,000 pressure washers sold at stores like Home Depot are being recalled in the U.S. and Canada. Some people got hurt because parts of the washers can break off and cause injuries. A recall notice published by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission yesterday said that TTI Outdoor Power Equipment is recalling some Ryobi electric pressure washers. The capacitor inside these washers can overheat and burst, sending parts flying. The CPSC said there have been 135 reports of capacitors overheating in the U.S. This includes 41 explosions that have caused 32 injuries to people's fingers, hands, face, and eyes. The CPSC said that these products were sold at Home Depot and Direct Tools factory outlet between July 2017 and June 2024 for about $300 to $400 in stores and online. People who have the recalled pressure washers are urged to stop using them immediately and visit Ryobi's recall website to get a free repair kit with a new capacitor.
And check your fridge because there is another shrimp recall. Aquastar is recalling more than 26,000 packages of its 6-ounce cocktail shrimp. The shrimp may contain cesium-137, which is a harmful substance that gives off radiation. Cesium-137 can raise the risk of cancer if consumed. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration said that the shrimp came from Indonesia and was sold only at Walmart stores. It was shipped to nearly 30 states between July 31st and August 16th. So far, thankfully, no one has reported getting sick. People who have bought the recalled shrimp should not eat it, and they can return the shrimp to a store for a full refund.
Up ahead, a new review of scientific research indicates there could be another way to minimize the risk of cancer.
We're going to speak with a healthcare provider turned survivor for analysis.
In the 1980s, it was a safe haven for skaters. After being closed for more than a decade, Brooklyn Bank Skate Park has now reopened. The latest details after this.
I trod on my glasses yesterday, and I had to pay up front for a new pair that I can't even pick up for another 10 days. So I looked for another way, and I found Select Specs. I ordered online. My new glasses just arrived this morning, and I can pay over the next few weeks. This is the way to buy glasses.
See now, pay later with Select Specs. Next day delivery and deferred payment options only at selectspecs.com.
Focus on beauty, showcase nature, share kindness, feel brightness, capture the beautiful moments in your eyes. Your works will be showcased in galleries and on multiple online platforms, appreciated and collected. Please visit photo.ntdtv.com.
大提琴不仅仅是一件乐器，它是有生命、有感情的，需要我们精心的照顾。往往我们一个小小的动作，可能都会对人情绪产生微妙的影响。天音的品牌是福星，我们对于传统的理念很荣幸被神韵艺术团选为指定供应商。时间是酿造音色的不可替代的陪伴。我跟大提琴已经有60多年的友情了，每一把琴都有它自己的个性，熟悉它，才能真正发挥它的潜力。所以，我希望给你的每一把琴，都是首先我所信任的。
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Stephanie Cox. Recent studies suggest GLP-1 weight loss medications may reduce the risk of cancer. Or rather, a recent review of the studies on this topic have revealed a potential link there. It's early days yet, and there's indications of some risks as well. But let's look at what the research is finding so far. Welcoming this morning, Pete Sulek, a chiropractor and cancer survivor himself, and now the founder of the Be Resilient program. Dr. Pete, good to have you with us this morning.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you.
Thank you. Now, I'd love to start with just the lowdown on this review of the research. What are we learning about the potential link between GLP-1 drugs and cancer?
You know, I think it's pretty promising, the fact that GLP-1s in an 8-year trial really showed that the cancer risks reduced by 17% in ovarian cancers, endometrial cancers, and brain cancers, which is very promising. Really, for me, it shows that cancer is not random, but if you change the body metabolically, you can see huge uptick.
So, according to your analysis, or perhaps what the studies are showing, what is the mechanism at work here?
I think when you look at GLP-1s, they're really going to affect glucose, insulin, and inflammation, all three contributors to cancer metabolically and really mitochondrial dysfunction. And so anytime you can reduce, cancer really feeds on sugar. It needs insulin, it needs inflammation, it needs weight gain. So you'll see in those that are obese, they have a higher uptick in risk for cancer. So anything we can do to reduce those metabolically, I think is hugely beneficial.
And some of the studies did point to an associated slight increase in a risk for kidney cancer with these drugs. How would you accommodate that in this new research?
Yeah. I think you have to look at any drug is going to have side effects. And so you're looking at kidney issues, thyroid issues they're talking about, even pancreas and gallbladder. And so for me, it's about how do we establish the terrain of the body in such a way that we don't have to depend on a medication. And two, we don't want to downregulate the body's ability to do what it was created to do on its own. But while the research is very encouraging and the study is very encouraging, we have to establish the body metabolically.
And this also comes from your personal experience. You survived cancer yourself. Tell us a bit about the journey that you went on and what you learned.
November 25th of this last year, I was, shocked to find out that I had a grade 4 diffuse astrocytoma brain cancer. I had a tennis ball-sized tumor in my head, and they told me I had a 1% chance to be alive in 8 months. And so through a series of just really establishing the terrain of my body through diet, supplementation, detoxification, oxygenation, and faith, I really began to rebuild my body. And at the 4-month mark, they said I was cancer-free. I was in complete remission and had a normal brain. So I'm very, very thankful.
Incredible. And that I'm so glad to hear that. And
thank you.
Yes. And what a story. You're now sharing much of what you've learned along the way. And what would you say are some of the key aspects of what people can implement in their lives to take forward the things that you've learned?
I think it's important to understand the mechanisms of action with cancer. And so for us, it's a matter of let's begin to block glucose. And cancer is very adaptable, so we'll also go after glutamine and fatty acids. And so for me, it was really 5 pillars of diet, supplementation, detoxification, oxygenation, and faith. And so every day, I still incorporate those things today, even though I'm a month removed from that 8-month anniversary of when they said I'd have a 1% chance of being alive in 8 months.
Amazing. I want to dig into that last point. You mentioned faith. What exactly did you do, and in terms of your mindset or your belief, if you could walk us through that?
I think, when your life is on the line, it's making sure you have perspective. And so for me, my faith in God is very, very important, and making sure that I can enter every day. One, just being so grateful. I think you start to appreciate truly the blessings of family, and I have kids and 2 kids that are married. And so just appreciating the small things. I promise you, I do not take for granted the brevity of life and the gift that life offers all of us.
Yeah, and were there any specific practices or prayers, or is there anything that you kind of recommend to people to get in touch with that belief?
Yeah, I think too, understanding that our lives are of great worth and value and significance in the eyes of God. And I think that's so important to understand, because so many people, we look and feel like God's mad at us. And I really don't believe that. I believe the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. God comes to give life and give it more abundantly. And so it's just keeping that perspective, knowing that your life is very, very significant in the eyes of God. And just surrounding yourself with people that are for you and not against you, and can help you walk and navigate this journey, because it's a very lonely journey for a lot of people. And so just letting them know that they have an advocate in the fight with them.
And just considering all that you've been through and the fact that now you're out there sharing your solutions with people, is there any kind of misunderstandings that you come across or myths that you think should be busted, on this topic?
Yeah, I think most people assume that cancer is random and that it's just based on genetics. But while cancer might be 10% genetics, it's mostly based on epigenetics or lifestyle. And so there's things that we can all do to empower ourselves. I think the biggest thing is many people assume that food doesn't matter, but food completely, unequivocally matters. Food is medicine, and we can either feed disease or we can starve it. And my objective wasn't even to treat cancer. It was to establish a body in such a way that cancer was no longer hospitable in my body.
And I know much of your work also relating to food is about reducing the fight or flight state that the body can sometimes remain locked into, but calming down and getting into that peaceful center that we all wish to be in all of the time. So amazing that you made it here and you're still here. So glad that you came onto our show this morning. Dr. Pete, thank you so much for your time today.
It was an honor to be with you.
What a great story. Amazing.
Yeah, so amazing.
Food, faith, all good stuff for the body, right?
Certainly, certainly. And if you're out there and looking for some great places to skateboard, a famous,
as I am.
looking at you, a famous skateboarding spot under the Brooklyn Bridge has reopened after being closed for more than 10 years.
That's right, the Brooklyn Banks, one of the most important places in New York's skate culture. Have a look at this.
Brooklyn Banks became a hub in the 1980s, drawing skaters from across the 5 New York boroughs.
Why this space is so important to skateboarding culture is this was sort of back in the 80s. This was a space where you were allowed to skate, where you didn't get kicked out. So the culture was able to incubate here. As far as what I hope for the space is that people realize the importance of this space, but then kind of put their own mark on it.
Gotham Park is a non-profit organization working to revitalize the underutilized land beneath the Manhattan side of the Brooklyn Bridge. They led the effort to reopen the site.
We started working on this together about 4 years ago, and our question was, what if? You know, this whole place was surrounded by fencing and closed off, and had been closed off for over a decade. And we just thought, what if we just moved the fences? We got the yes from City Hall, and then DOT came on board, and they have done all of this work.
The Skate Park Project, a nonprofit founded by professional skateboarder Tony Hawk, also backed the effort.
And the Banks is among the 3 or 4 most historically significant skate spaces in the country. It's where skate culture and streetwear and punk and hip hop and so many elements of youth culture sort of blossomed there in the 80s and 90s.
And for veteran skaters, the Banks revival is more than symbolic.
It's like a candle that you can never put out. So it's like an eternal flame.
Once a skater, always a skater. So glad to see that iconic place reopen. We got to go to a quick break. We're going to be back shortly within the next hour.
Food. It fuels our bodies, nourishes our spirits, and brings us together. Because we all need nutritious food to thrive.
Food gives me energy and it also helps me focus.
But not everyone knows where their next meal is coming from. And 1 in 7 people in America face hunger. It's tougher than ever for too many of us. But the simple truth is, ending hunger is possible, and it starts with you. Call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, to help families in your community facing hunger. Feeding America works from coast to coast with partner food banks, food pantries, and meal programs. Your monthly gift delivers food where it's needed most, puts fresh food on the table, and helps kids have healthy meals all year round, even when school is out.
You can see the difference with the kids when they're full. Food is everything.
Please call the number on your screen or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org. Give $19 a month. Your first gift can double in impact. And we'll send you this free canvas grocery bag as a reminder of how you're helping to end hunger for good.
When it comes down to it, it's about taking care of your family first and the loved ones that you need to provide for.
Food donations help me tremendously, and I'm very grateful for the food bank.
I have hope.
The simple truth is, ending hunger in America is possible. You can help make it happen. The need is urgent. Call or go online now to helpfeedingamerica.org, and your gift can double in impact.
My name's Stacy, I'm 57, and I was adopted in 2020.
We were adopted in 2019.
And we were adopted in 2021.
We had a house, and it sounds crazy, but it wasn't a home. The one thing that Jake and Emma brought is it became a home.
When I met Dakota, he had just turned 14.
You weren't there for the first this and the first that. I missed the first words, but we got a lot of other firsts.
Watching her say, oh my God, I cannot believe I got my license. And she's like, I passed. And I'm like, girl.
See them grow. It is...
They chose to love us. They didn't have to. They chose us. Family.
You and you. Kids in the middle.
What I thought was a complete life was nowhere near complete, but it is now.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org.
Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. Authorities identify the 2 children killed in the horrific Minneapolis school shooting as investigators continue to uncover disturbing details about the gunman.
The White House responds to the tragedy with Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt defending the power of prayer, plus new numbers on the D.C. crime crackdowns and a warning for Chicago.
President Trump ordering a review of taxpayer grants and rolling out sweeping new executive orders. From government architecture to federal unions, what Trump's latest orders aim to do.
Russia hit Kyiv on Thursday with missile and drone strikes, killing at least 23. President Trump said the attack undermines peace talks even as Ukraine and Russia continue negotiating security terms.
New Orleans is holding events commemorating Hurricane Katrina's landfall. Today is the 20th anniversary of one of the most devastating natural disasters in America. David Lamb is live in New Orleans.
Labor Day is on Monday and weekend travel already picking up. AAA is reminding drivers that timing is everything if you want to avoid delays.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Today is Friday, August 29th. You're watching NTD Good Morning. And in today's top news, this just in, Israeli military recovering the remains of 2 hostages from Gaza today. That's according to the Prime Minister's office.
One of the hostages was identified as 56-year-old Ilan Weiss. His wife and daughter were also taken hostage on October 7th, but were released in November of 23.
The second hostage is still unidentified. This leaves 48 hostages still remaining in Gaza, but Israeli authorities believe there's only about 20 still alive. And a Minneapolis community in mourning after those 2 young children were killed in that mass shooting at a Catholic school. Families are remembering 10-year-old Harper Moisky and 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel for their joy and kindness, even as loved ones struggle with unimaginable loss.
NTD's Daniel Monahan has reactions of family members and the latest on the investigation.
10-year-old Harper Moisky's family confirmed Thursday she was killed when a shooter opened fire on praying Catholic school students in Minneapolis. Harper's parents said she was a bright, joyful child whose kindness and spirit touched everyone who knew her. The second victim killed in the shooting was identified as 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel. His father, Jesse Merkel, said a coward decided to take their 8-year-old son away from them.
Because of their actions, we will never be allowed to hold him, talk to him, play with him.
The grieving father asked people to remember Fletcher for the person he was and not the act that ended his life.
Fletcher loved his family, friends, fishing, cooking, and any sport that he was allowed to play.
And said he hopes in time his family will find healing.
Give your kids an extra hug and kiss today. We love you, Fletcher. You'll always be with us.
The children were both killed while sitting in the pews as other students dove to the ground to take cover. Shooter Robin Westman, fired 116 rifle rounds, and attempted to fire a shot from a handgun, but it backfired. Police say he then turned the gun on himself before the police could reach him. Mary Grace Westman, the shooter's mother, worked at the Church of Annunciation before retiring. She is not cooperating with investigators and has hired a criminal defense attorney. Authorities say an alleged video manifesto was scheduled to be published on YouTube following the shooting.
More than anything, the shooter wanted to kill children, defenseless children.
Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara said the children could not see the shooter.
He was standing outside of the building, firing through very narrow church windows on the level where they would line up with the pews.
A simple measure may have prevented a higher death toll.
Annunciation Church had a practice that once Mass began, they locked the doors of the church. This incident occurred shortly after the Mass was beginning.
Hennepin EMS Chief Martin Shearer says there's been a lot of unrecognized heroes in the event.
The children that were protecting other children, which is really amazing to hear about. I might be saying too much, but we had one kid that covered up another kid and took a shotgun blast to his back and things like that.
Mourners gathered on Thursday at a church to pray for the victims of the shooting, and memorials now decorate the site of the deadly incident. Minnesota Democrats called for action on gun control on Thursday.
We need a statewide and a federal ban on assault weapons.
This is something that is simple. A simple ban to make sure people who should not have access to these weapons do not get them.
Vice President J.D. Vance says America has a mental health crisis.
We take way more psychiatric medication than any other nation on earth, and I think it's time for us to start asking some very hard questions about the root causes of this violence.
Authorities say 9 victims of the shooting are being cared for at the hospital. 1 child is still in critical condition. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And federal law enforcement officers say they stopped a potential school shooting in Washington, D.C. The ATF says it worked with Washington, D.C. Transit Police to make an arrest on Wednesday. That's the same day as the school shooting at that Catholic grade school in Minneapolis. They did not release the name of this suspect, but it's known to be a juvenile who allegedly made a threat against a public D.C. school on social media. Investigators recovered 7 firearms at the residence where the arrest was made. D.C. Public Schools says it's not tracking any students that have been apprehended in the incident. The White House responding to the school shooting in Minnesota. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt leans into what she described as the power of prayer while highlighting the administration's push for crime reduction and support for American labor. NTD's Mari Otsu has more from the White House.
President Trump and the First Lady encouraged the entire nation to join all of us in praying for the victims and their families as they face unimaginable grief and loss.
The White House responding to the Minnesota school shooting that took the lives of an 8- and a 10-year-old.
In a time of mourning like this, it's utterly disrespectful to deride the power of prayer in this country, and it's disrespectful to the millions of Americans of faith.
As Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt is defending the power of prayer, the FBI is currently investigating the shooting as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics. Press Secretary Leavitt tells NTD's Iris Tao that the administration is focused on removing public safety threats from our communities.
Iris. Thank you, Caroline. 2 questions on the shooting. What's the administration's message to some concerned parents across the country who might be now worried about their kids' safety in light of the latest incident?
We completely and totally understand the concerns of parents across the country. This tragedy it's heartbreaking. As a parent myself, there are no words to describe just the heartbreak that these families must be enduring.
Meanwhile, Press Secretary Leavitt is touting the lower D.C. crime numbers. As the White House is doubling down on its stance on crime, it is now bringing its attention to Chicago, criticizing local officials for ignoring the problem.
To Americans in Democrat-run cities nationwide, decline is a choice. You don't have to live in constant fear of being robbed, raped, or murdered. Your leaders are lying to you, and they have been failing you for decades.
Levitt says that for 13 years, Chicago has had the most murders of any U.S. city. And as Labor Day approaches on Monday, the White House is touting that nearly $10 trillion in investments is being brought into America.
For decades, the hardworking men and women of our country who built the greatest nation in world history were sold out by selfish, greedy, short-sighted globalists who put our country on a path to economic and cultural ruin. This national disgrace is over, and the dignity of American labor is being defended.
The White House says that since President Trump took office, the economy has added nearly 500,000 jobs to the workforce, and that the average taxpayer can expect a nearly $4,000 tax cut. Reporting from the White House, Mari Otsu, NTD News.
Thanks to Mari Otsu for that report. And President Trump is set to address the General Assembly of the United Nations next month.
The White House confirms yesterday Trump will travel to New York to take part in the 80th General Assembly on September 23rd.
This will be his 5th address to the international body and the first one of his second term.
During his past addresses, Trump has focused on North Korea, Iran, China tariffs, and illegal immigration. And the European Union went forward with their end of the bargain with the U.S. yesterday and began the process of removing tariffs and other barriers to some U.S. goods. In turn, duties on most of their exports to the U.S. will go down from 27.5% to 15%. Joining us to discuss the impact on the car market is Lauren Fix. She's an automotive expert with Car Coach Reports. Great to see you this morning, Lauren. We do love our German luxury cars as well as some lucky folks, maybe Italian sports cars. But what impact will this reduction in the tariff have on the U.S. car market, both for consumers as well as the manufacturers, domestic and EU ones?
Well, part of the structure I found very interesting, and I have a report coming out tonight at 6:15 Eastern on some of the more details if you want to dive a little deeper into this. See, one of the things is when you buy a BMW, it's made in South Carolina. You buy a Mercedes-Benz, it's made in Alabama. Audis are made in Mexico right now. But other brands, of course, the Italian brands, of course, are made in Italy. That's part of the mystique. But one of the things to keep in mind, amongst other brands, of course, is when they come here, usually the engines are built specifically for the U.S. marketplace. We have our own regulations, whether it be for road conditions, for safety, but also for emissions. And Europe has their own standards. It's called Euro 7. And it's a much higher standards. In some cases, it's completely different. Like they require forward collision warning, they cross traffic intervention, both forward and rear. And some of those are already available on some premium vehicles. And even here in the Japanese brands, like I'm driving a Lexus this week, it has those features standard. The German brands add them. Sometimes they upcharge for those. But this would change everything. If this agreement gets locked into place, you will now see the most unique thing, and for me as a car enthusiast, very exciting thing, we will be able to get some of the cars that are in Europe here, and some of our vehicles can be sold in Europe. And now what the problem has always been is we have different safety standards than they do. They have a lot of pedestrian safety that's built into their cars, but also a lot of the emission standards. So they would then have to match our standards, not us matching their standards, which would actually be quite good for the car brands because then they build one vehicle for the full lineup across both continents. You've got all of Europe plus the US would mean car manufacturers don't have to build for two standards, two sets of testing, two sets of design. And some of it's really exciting, like laser lighting, side cameras. Instead of we have side mirrors, they have little cameras. I'm not a big fan of that. I prefer an actual mirror. But a lot of that's starting to come into play with rear view mirrors where you flip the switch and you get an actual camera, especially when you have a car full of kids.
So what does all this mean for the American consumer? Is it more choice? Is it, more efficiency for the manufacturers means the prices come down? What should we expect, after a quarter or so as this starts to trickle in?
Well, I'd like to think that your words go right to the CEO's ears, but we know how that goes. We're all thinking, great, lower prices, better choice, the cooler design, better safety, all sounds great. I think it's going to take time for that to trickle down. There's a lot of impact here. So we're already building cars here in the U.S., except for Audi. Porsche does not build vehicles here, although they do have a partnership. Volkswagen Group is Audi, Porsche, and of course, Volkswagen and other brands that are not sold here. We could get Seat, which is a Spanish car company. We could get Cupra, which is their very cool luxury line, which we're supposed to get here in 2030. And I've reviewed them. They're amazing vehicles. It's like a cross between an Audi and a Volkswagen. So our choices could get broader. You could get Skoda. You could get Peugeots here. You find what you like, and offering more choices to consumers is good because that creates competition, which means brands are going to have to lower their prices in order to get your sales. That's one part of it. I think it's going to take time for that to happen. I mean, it's great on the surface. I think our biggest hurdle is, although Europe's like, yeah, we're in for this because we're going to save on tariffs, the bigger factor is that Euro 7 standard for emissions is about particles that come off of tires, what comes out of tailpipes. They're going to have to basically change to match our standards. That may be a problem. That may be a hurdle. We've tried this before in the past. We also have something really interesting no one even talks about. It's called the chicken tax. So this goes way, way back, and I won't get into the history that I have covered that on my channel. But what it does is, for example, Mercedes makes vehicles and they'll disassemble them, put them on different pallets, ship them to South Carolina, reassemble them, and then sell them. And you'll see that in their Sprinter vans or their Metris, which they're now going to start building here. But why they do that is to avoid the tariffs. It's called the chicken tax. It goes back to actually chicken when we were flooding their market with our poultry. So now when you start looking at that, if that goes away, that means your selection gets bigger. The cost of producing vehicles is less. And hopefully, they'll lower prices so that you can afford these vehicles.
And Lauren, as we start to finish up, there's still a pretty hefty tax on EU products, right? 15% is much higher than it was just a year ago. So what does that ultimately mean for the auto market, particularly for the consumers and for the producers? Are they going to just having to continue to reinvest in American jobs to compete, or is it worth them eating the tax? And what does that mean for, your Fords and your GMs?
Well, the big thing for U.S. domestic is that we'll be able to sell more vehicles into Europe. Not everything's going to sell. We're not going to sell Suburbans and Escalades. That's not going to be something that you typically see all around European cities. If you've ever been to Europe, their roads are narrower. They're very tight. There's no place to park in many cases. I was in Italy driving around Lake Como. I couldn't find a spot to pull over. I mean,
I did it too. It's dangerous. Don't do it.
I know you can.
They drive crazy over there.
They do, and I think that's their mindset. And also, I was driving around the UK for Goodwood. I was with Paul, who's on with you on every Monday, and the roads were so narrow. We actually had our side mirror clipped. So we're not going to see gigantic vehicles built there. We'll see the smaller vehicles that we offer sold there, and that would be good. But also, they'll be able to bring some of their vehicles here. So choice on our side, on their side, more choice from us. Hopefully, this will help the domestic brands of Ford, Stellantis. Tesla's already selling and building there. But I think this will help lower costs. This will help open up choice. And hopefully, we all get on the same standard, because this back and forth between the Euro standard and the U.S. standard really is complicated. If you dive really deep into it, it'll give you a headache. But opening up choices for consumers is great, because I'd love to see some of the very cool cars in Europe come here. And then, of course, selling some of those small pickup trucks like a Ranger and a Maverick from Ford being sold in Europe. And I think they would sell well. It's just a matter of having that opportunity, which they couldn't sell there before because of emission standards. So this could open up a lot of things. The best thing is we're now taking in 15%. It's not going to impact people who are buying Lamborghinis and Porsches. Let's just face, they're going to buy them anyhow. They just showed a bunch of vehicles at Pebble Beach. They were all sold. All the special editions were sold before they even showed us the vehicles. So we know that it's not going to impact super wealthy, but for the average person, this should open up some choices and lower some prices.
Lauren Fix, always great to have your insight. Have a great holiday weekend. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. You too.
And Russian drone and missile strikes hit Ukraine's capital yesterday, killing at least 23 people. President Trump said the attack undermines peace efforts.
Meanwhile, security conditions for a peace agreement are still being worked out in Europe. NTD international correspondent David Vives reports from Paris.
Russia pounded Ukraine with deadly missiles and drone strikes early Thursday in a sweeping attack. At least 23 people were killed in the capital, according to Kyiv's military administration. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said President Trump was not happy about the news, but was also not surprised, given the two countries have been at war for a long time. She noted that Ukraine also struck Russia in August.
As a matter of fact, 20% of Russia's oil refinery capacity over the course of their attacks throughout the month of August. So the president is continuing to watch this intently, and this killing, unfortunately, will continue as long as the war continues, which is why the president wants it to end.
Last Friday, President Trump said he would give Russian President Vladimir Putin a couple weeks to negotiate peace with Ukraine, delaying his deadline for possible action against Moscow. NATO. While U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff claimed Russia had agreed on a NATO-style mutual defense framework, talks on security conditions remain unresolved. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stressed Russia rejects European proposals on security guarantees for Ukraine and would not accept any NATO presence on its neighbor's territory. Since their meeting with Trump on August 18th, EU leaders have shown mixed signals regarding peace talks negotiations. EU Vice President Kaja Kallas said the bloc will continue training Ukrainian soldiers and arming Kyiv, positions long opposed by Moscow. According to Rodrigo Ballester, head of the Center for European Affairs, this shows a lack of diplomacy.
I'm very surprised at the tone of the EU's top diplomat, Mrs. Kallas, since the beginning of this conflict. It's surprising to nominate a diplomat who does everything but diplomacy when it comes to the conflict in Russia. Her job is to keep the channels of communication open.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz also voiced pessimism about the possibility of a meeting between Zelensky and Putin after Russia's strike on Thursday.
There obviously will not be a meeting between President Zelensky and President Putin, different from what was agreed between President Trump and President Putin last week when we were in Washington together.
The German Chancellor, together with the French President and the UK's Prime Minister, continue to support sending European troops to Ukraine. But Ballester argues this stance does not align with the current peace negotiations.
I mean, I can understand it to a certain extent because it's true that Russia mostly understands the language of strength. Geopolitics is not about values and moral and dogmas, it's about strength and military strength. On the other hand, some of their declarations, recently, for example, the declaration of Macron, who compared Putin to an ogre who wants to keep swallowing countries in the middle of the negotiations, sounds also like a sabotage. So does the European Union in general really want a peace deal or not? This is a question that I cannot answer today. I still have some doubts.
While security terms are discussed behind closed doors, Ballester says there's still hope for a resolution under Trump's supervision.
I think there are pretty good elements on the table to believe that it's going to happen. And the main one is that Trump is basically doing what he said during the campaign and since the beginning of its term. He doesn't want this war to continue and is not going to, invest and be actively involved. This war, without the full support, military and economic support of the United States, cannot happen, cannot continue, because the European Union, so the European countries, at least most of them, are not in a position to continue this war.
The White House says more economic sanctions are ready against Russia if peace talks fail. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
We got to get them together. Still to come, New Orleans is holding events commemorating Hurricane Katrina. Today is the 20th anniversary of one of the most devastating natural disasters in America. David Lamb is live in New Orleans.
And Lisa Cook is suing to keep her seat on the Federal Reserve Board after President Trump moved to fire her. The fight heads to the courts today.
大提琴不仅仅是一件乐器，它是有生命、有感情的，需要我们精心的照顾。往往我们一个小小的动作，可能都会对人情绪产生微妙的影响。天音的品牌是福星，我们对于传统的理念很荣幸被神韵艺术团选为指定供应商。时间是酿造音色的不可替代的陪伴。我跟大提琴已经有60多年的友情了，每一把琴都有它自己的个性，熟悉它，才能真正发挥它的潜力。 以我希望给你的每一把琴，都是首先我所信任的。
My name's Stacy, I'm 57, and I was adopted in 2020.
We were adopted in 2019.
And we were adopted in 2021.
We had a house, and it sounds crazy, but it wasn't a home. The one thing that Jake and Emma brought is it became a home.
When I met Dakota, he had just turned 14.
You weren't there for the first this and the first that. I missed the first words, but we got a lot of other firsts.
Watching her say, oh my God, I cannot believe I got my license. And she's like, I passed. And I'm like, girl.
See them grow. It is.
They chose to love us. They didn't have to. They chose us. Family.
You and you.
Kids in the middle.
What I thought was a complete life was nowhere near complete, but it is now.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said yesterday that there was a lot of trouble at the CDC. The comments came a day after CDC Director Susan Menarez was fired.
I would say this, that first of all, I will confirm that we let go Susan Menarez yesterday. I'm not going to talk about personnel issues, but the CDC is an agency that is very troubled for a very long time, and anybody who lived through the COVID pandemic and saw all of these bizarre recommendations that were not science-based, all the misinformation, understands that the CDC has on its website today that among the top 10 medical innovations, greatest medical accomplishments in history was abortion. This is one of the greatest medical accomplishments because it keeps small families. Go to the website, look at it. Fluoridation, giving kids a toxin, and vaccines. So there's a lot of trouble at CDC, and it's going to require getting rid of some people over the long term in order for us to change the institutional culture.
Kennedy was speaking at a news conference in Texas alongside Governor Greg Abbott. Several top officials at the CDC stepped down following the ouster of Susan Menarez as director. One is Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis, director of the agency's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases. He said recent policy and material proposals do not reflect scientific reality.
Daskalakis says the move was motivated in part by the removal of COVID-19 vaccines from immunization schedules for healthy children and pregnant women. The CDC's chief medical officer, Deborah Ori, is also exiting. She said Menarez's attempts to be transparent, including posting documents for public comment, had been blocked.
Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook has filed a lawsuit to block President Trump's attempt to fire her. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. will hear Cook's bid today. She's arguing the president lacks legal authority to remove a federal governor without cause. Trump has accused Cook of mortgage fraud tied to home loans she obtained in 2021 before her appointment to the Federal Reserve. Her lawyers say the allegations are baseless and argue they do not amount to sufficient cause for dismissal. The lawsuit also accuses Trump of violating Cook's right to due process under the Constitution by firing her without notice or hearing. Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte first raised the allegations. He noted that Cook has not denied the mortgage documents in question are hers. And President Trump is moving to reshape federal policy on several fronts this week.
He's ordered an investigation into politically motivated federal grants and signed executive orders on government architecture and federal labor unions. Here are those details.
President Trump has directed federal agencies to investigate whether taxpayer money has been misused for partisan political activities and lobbying. The White House says some existing grants had highly political overtones, including funding for LGBT teen programs and initiatives for, quote, advancing racial justice in elementary mathematics. In a memorandum Thursday, Trump wrote, in addition to being a wasteful, abusive, and potentially fraudulent use of the American people's money, the possible use of federal grants as slush funds for political and legislative advocacy raises serious legal concerns. The president also moved to standardize federal buildings, signing an executive order requiring classical architecture as the default style for new government projects. According to the order, public buildings should uplift and beautify public spaces and command respect from the general public. Trump's directive restores a style he says is rooted in the vision of Washington and Jefferson. It rejects brutalist and modernist designs that, according to Trump, many Americans find unappealing. And in another executive order, Trump acted to end collective bargaining for federal unions at certain agencies tied to national security. The order is directed at agencies like NASA, the National Weather Service, the Patent and Trademark Office, and hydropower facilities managed by the Bureau of Reclamation. The White House says the order is designed to ensure national security agencies can operate without delay.
President Trump is ending a long-standing tariff exemption, hitting billions of small packages with new import taxes.
Starting today, all shipments valued under $800 are now subject to duties, taxes, and fees, closing the so-called de minimis loophole that's been in place since 1938.
Officials say the move will help curb drug trafficking, piracy, and counterfeit goods while generating billions in new revenue.
White House trade advisor Peter Navarro said closing this loophole will save American lives and add up to $10 billion a year in tariff revenues.
In 2015, the exemption was raised from $200 to $800. Since then, and after Trump's first term, customs data showed packages claiming de minimis exemption skyrocketed from 139 million to more than 1.3 billion in 2024, many from fast fashion platforms like Shein and Temu.
The administration stresses this change is permanent with no chance of reversal.
And today marks the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina's landfall, one of the costliest natural disasters in U.S. history that claimed over 1,300 lives. Local organizations like the New Orleans Katrina Commemoration Foundation and the Hip Hop Caucus will host events to mark the occasion. Let's go live now to NTD national correspondent David Land in Louisiana. Good morning, David. Good to see you. How are people feeling about the commemoration?
Hi, Sev. Good to see you. So the commemoration is definitely a big deal. People are feeling it's basically two sides. They are solemn about the event because it sadly took over 1,300 lives back in 2005 when it started. But people are also resilient because the city's been building for over 2 decades now. So it was back in 2005 in late August when the southern U.S. was hit by Hurricane Katrina, and New Orleans was one of the cities most impacted. So here we are today. And right behind me, you'll see a wreath ceremony that's about to take place in about 1 hour to honor the victims that lost their lives during that time. And later there will also be a march to also commemorate and have more activities for the event. So right here we are at the Katrina Memorial area in New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, yesterday, the Ella Project, which is they were holding a public panel discussion. It's a nonprofit that provides legal assistance to artists. Now, they were holding an event at the New Orleans Jazz Museum, and people were talking about their concerns about how the development and rebuilding has happened, and how they're going to preserve the New Orleans culture, as well as the increasing rebuilding costs that is affecting housing here. Let's take a look.
It's not going to last much longer if we continue going down that road. We have to change that. A lot of houses, since they come back and they fix them, the rent is too high.
At the time right after Katrina, many folks were saying that, New Orleans isn't coming back, that the city's dead, there's no reason to rebuild. But New Orleanians knew that, no, we're going to rebuild. 20 years after Katrina, it's vibrant, it's happening. New Orleans is resilient, and we're going to keep moving forward.
Now, in 2005, it was around August 23rd when the depression system, the tropical depression, was just a small system, and then it rapidly intensified. And on August 29th, it was a Category 4 hurricane, and that's when it struck Louisiana, New Orleans. So in total, there was an estimated about $100 billion of damage, and despite the catastrophe that happened here, New Orleans residents are very resilient. they still call this place their home, and and they love it. And we can see that with the annual memorial and commemoration, as we're going to see today. And Steph, back to you.
Yeah, see some great setup there. Looking forward to and people preparing for that celebration. Thank you so much for your update today, NTD congressional correspondent David Lamb. Coming up, an opera legend shares her lifelong journey in the vocal arts. She has some tips for competitors ahead of NTD's 10th International Chinese Vocal Competition. You won't want to miss that after the break.
My mom and dad were traditional Asian parents. Now my father would go to work before I woke up in the morning, and then he would come home too tired to play with me. I tell my son, I love you every single day. Now my dad has never said that to me. Not because he doesn't love me, but because culturally it wasn't comfortable for him. So I teased him the other day and I said, how come you never say that to me? And he said, you're too old now. Now that he's a grandfather, he says, I love you to my son every time he sees him. My advice to all the fathers out there, forget the material things, forget the cultural restrictions. They grow up way too fast for you to waste even a single precious minute or moment.
Say bye-bye. Bye-bye.
I debate all day. It's what I do. But there are some things that are undebatable, like your mental health, my own mental health. I was in a dark place when my brother passed away in a car accident. I've never been more devastated than the day I lost my mom. I was depressed, miserable, in ways I never imagined. I reached out, and my sisters came. My pastor, my therapist. They helped me get through it. I found that the more I spoke up, the healthier my mind became. The chaos that was in me began to subside. I was more focused, clear. When you love your mind, you can go so much further. That's not up for debate. Find mental health resources at loveyourmindtoday.org.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. Minneapolis community continues to grieve after 2 young children were killed in a shooting at a Catholic school. 10-year-old Harper Moisky and 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel were remembered by their families as joyful and kind. Authorities are investigating an alleged manifesto and videos left behind by the shooter. Meanwhile, Minnesota Democrats are calling for gun control. President Trump is ordering agencies to investigate whether taxpayer grants have been misused for partisan causes, including programs for LGBT teens and racial justice in education. He's also signed an order making classical architecture the default style for new federal buildings, and another targeting collective bargaining for unions and national security agencies like NASA and the Patent Office. And the Trump administration has also approved an $825 million arms sale to Ukraine yesterday. The State Department says the package includes more than 3,000 extended-range missiles, GPS systems, and support equipment. This is after Russia launched a massive air attack on Kyiv yesterday, which Ukraine says killed at least 23 and dozens more wounded. European Union officials say that their diplomatic offices were damaged in the strike, prompting an emergency meeting at the UN today. And Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook is suing to block President Trump's attempt to fire her. A federal judge in Washington will hear the case today. Cook argues a president cannot remove a Fed governor without cause. Trump says there is cause, alleged mortgage fraud tied to her 2021 home loans. But Cook's lawyers say that the claims are baseless and do not meet the legal threshold for dismissal. The lawsuit also alleges Trump violated her due process rights. Those are this morning's top headlines. And with that, Steph, over to you.
Thanks, Carrie. From today till Sunday, NTD will host the 10th International Chinese Vocal Competition at New York City's Kaufman Music Center. On Sunday, renowned mezzo-soprano Frederica von Stade, a two-time Grand Prix de Disque winner and 9-time Grammy nominee, will lead a masterclass before the finale. She joins NTD's Iris Tao to share her lifelong journey in the vocal arts and has some advice for the competition singers.
Replica, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So first of all, your portrayals of Mozart, as well as, for example, Rossini and French repertoire, has inspired a lot of people, and that's really giving you a lot of credit and also praises for your performances. What's the advice and for young artists, and as well as what does bel canto really mean to you?
I loved singing bel canto because it feels good with the voice, but it's really takes a long time to learn because it's so subtle. It's really just means pretty singing. And Rossini and Bellini is the most famous for it. You think of Callas singing Norma. And I just I worked with some marvelous, marvelous teachers. Their moms, their dads, they become everything to this young person who is dealing with an instrument that is tiny, that you can't see, that's somewhere in there, and trying to imagine how it works.
And here at NTD, the vocal competition really values clarity, purity, as well as truthful saying, some of the values that you embodied throughout your own journey and career. What's the one thing that you would tell young singers as they prepare for this competition?
The one thing is mean what you say. In other words, when you're singing a song or an aria, there's always a story behind it. It's what enables us to take people to another region of human existence through the voice. What makes people, when they hear Pavarotti or Mirella Freni or Joyce DiDonato, it's the story that counts. It takes the pressure off yourself, and it's easy to concentrate on. You just have to keep doing it.
I was actually hosting the vocal competition last year, and I witnessed from the backstage like how intense it could be actually as they were going to go up to the stage. Yes. But once they're on the stage, they're perfect.
No, yeah. Once you get there, you're okay. The opera house is so loving. From the minute you sort of come through the door, it's, "Hi, how are you? Nice to see you. Come on in, settle down, da da da." You know, I wish people knew how much fun rehearsing is, being silly and trying to do your best at the same time, you know. And we always have that cushion of gorgeous music around us. So no matter how far afield we go, we're protected by the music.
The power of music.
The power of music, yes.
What's your advice for the current generation of people who are trying to maintain those traditions, not only when it comes to arts and singing, but really traditional culture and values? How do we make sure that they don't get lost?
I think the best way is just to go and live in a country, if it's at all possible, and if for these young singers, it's very possible. And the next bit of advice is going to seem very trite and very negative, but I would make a plan to put your phone away or your social media for most of your day. Concentrate it in the morning and maybe in the afternoon, and then put it away. It's not just it's destroying communication. And communication is everything. And we as singers, that's what we do. I've seen what it's done to all the kids in our program who come in at 9 and they're willing and happy and they have concentration, and then they get their first phone at 11 or 12, and all of a sudden their whole attitude changes. And I think then you lose that marvelous tradition of communication, of trying to choose your words, of saying what you really mean and what you feel in a way that is comfortable for the person you're speaking to. All of that is a natural process, but it can be an artistic process as well.
Having seen these challenges when it comes to the younger generation in the current society, what gives you hope still about a future generation of young singers? What makes you hopeful still about
I think
their
it's a
future?
very exciting time for opera and singing, because there's such a lack of ear to throat communication in our world today. Everything is through a microphone or it's amplified, and I think it's more important than ever.
And Flicka, as you're looking forward to helping these young artists and at this NTD competition, what excites you the most about this journey? What do you look forward to really teaching them and helping them learn?
I entered many competitions at the beginning of my career, and out of maybe 12, I got a place in one, and I had a career. So that's one message I want to give to them. Winning this is not the beginning or the end of your career. It's a step. And bravo for taking the step, because it takes courage to put yourself out there to be judged. I've had very difficult and hard times to live through in my career. But though at this point, at 80, they're all forgotten. All I remember are the wonderful people I met, the exquisite voices I heard, the incredible conductors, the incredible staffs of everybody around. I just want them, I want to welcome them to the business, because basically they're already there.
Well, I'm sure there's been a lot of passion as well as rewarding moments in your journey, because you certainly don't look like 80.
Thank you.
Flicka, thank you so much for your words of encouragement and wisdom to our audience, to our participants, and thank you so much for extraordinary artistry and heart. Appreciate you being here.
I appreciate being here, and thank you very much, Iris, really. It's been lovely to look at this beautiful face, too. Thank you.
Coming up, Labor Day around the corner, pretty much here, and travel is already starting to pick up. AAA is reminding drivers that timing is everything. If you want to avoid the delays, get in the car right now and go.
This land, our America, built on hard work, determination, and grit. Sometimes the days run long, but hope, it never runs out, even when the food does, for America's veterans, working parents, even kids. Because in every corner of every town, even yours, millions of hardworking neighbors are facing a hunger crisis, many for the very first time. In this land of plenty, affording food shouldn't require second jobs and third shifts or choosing between your groceries and bills. Today, you can help change that. Call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, less than 63 cents a day, to help every neighbor get the food they urgently need. Because taking care of each other is what makes America strong. We're Feeding America, not just a name, but an action. Working with over 200 local food banks like the ones in your community, and demand is soaring.
You go to the grocery store, you spend $100, and $100 is a new $20 bill.
Even with 2 full-time jobs, it's hard to make ends meet.
These are tough times, but when we stand together, we become the very best of a strong America. Please call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org. Just $19 a month can feed a family today
And your first gift can double in impact. Plus, we'll send you this free canvas bag as a reminder of the hope you're delivering.
When it comes down to it, it's about taking care of your family first and the loved ones that you need to provide for.
Because you're not just giving food, you're fueling resilience for people across the nation. You're feeding America. Call or go online today to helpfeedingamerica.org, and your gift can double in impact.
Hi, I'm Ty Pennington, here for Choice Home Warranty. They protect my home from expensive repairs, and they can do the same for you. No matter if it's your refrigerator, plumbing, or more than 20 other home systems and appliances, Choice Home Warranty has saved millions of homeowners a whole lot of money. For a low monthly fee, you get their nationwide network of trusted local technicians with plans that cover repairs and replacements done quickly and the right way. No more headaches searching for technicians. No more budget-breaking chaos. Just a peace of mind of having Choice Home Warranty at your service. Call Choice Home Warranty now and save big with their special offer of your first month free and free limited roof coverage. Call now.
Call Choice Home Warranty for your free personalized quote and to get your first month free. Call in the next 5 minutes, and as our special offer, you'll receive free limited roof coverage. Call now to lock in your rate and save big.
Call 800-210-9106. 800-210-9106.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. We're glad you stuck around before you headed out for your Labor Day holiday travels. But we've got the lowdown for you on the traffic, which could get heavy as Labor Day approaches.
That's right. AAA is advising travelers to get on the road sooner rather than later.
What a lot of people do over Labor Day weekend is take short road trips or maybe even staycations. But if they're doing short road trips, what we're advising is leave, if you're going to leave on Thursday or Friday, do it earlier in the day. What a lot of people do is they wait until they get off work and then hit the road. You're going to get some traffic there because if where you live, schools are back in session, you're going to have school traffic mixed in with some travelers.
Now, while Labor Day doesn't see the volume of travelers when compared to other holidays, AAA still receives bookings from major cities across the country.
The good news is gas prices haven't changed much this summer. The national average has stayed around $3.15 in June, July, and in August.
And Labor Day is one of the more dangerous holiday weekends to drive, so it's worth taking on all of those tips about preparing your car, preparing yourself, sleeping well, have a nap before you go if you need to, but also be flexible. You know, if you need to take the longer route, maybe make it more of a long car trip and just to relax and enjoy it, you know.
Yeah, that's right. And the weather looks great. It's not super hot, but it looks, at least in the Northeast, it looks clear. I think it's going to be a fantastic weekend.
And a Viking longboat replica sailed under London's Tower Bridge yesterday in other news.
That's right. Moving on. It marks the final leg of a European voyage retracing ancient trade routes.
The Saga Farman is a full-size archaeological reconstruction of a 10th century Viking cargo ship. Known as a Nar, it's built from oak and pine. The original vessel was discovered in Norway in 1893, but wasn't excavated until the 1970s.
So this boat is handmade. It's a reconstruction of an old trade ship from the Viking Age that was found in Norway in a field because it went down in a storm in 998. And we know that quite precise. And we have decided to reconstruct it and build it and sail it on the routes that the Vikings did for trading and for settling and stuff like that. So it's a handmade Viking ship as close to the original as possible. The first year we went from Tønsberg to Miklagard to Istanbul through Europe on the Rhine and Danube River down the Black Sea. And then the second year we went from Istanbul to Rome through the Mediterranean. And this year we went from Rome and through France and across the English Channel to London. Well, friendly people here, and they're not worried about us coming, so that's pretty different. And we are here, you know, with the handicraft and the trading and not the violent part of the Viking Age.
It took years of hard work by dedicated enthusiasts to build an exact copy of the ship. They were supported by the governments of Denmark and Norway to recreate the vessel, which is 69 feet long and 16 feet wide.
That's awesome. Yeah, the Norse were known for their shipbuilding and navigation skills on the waters. They had 3 different types of ships: for cargo, for movement around the sea, but then also for raids. And that's what they're known for, of course, is attacking other ships and taking all the goods.
We saw a little bit of history repeating, but thankfully not the whole lot.
That's right.
And they came in out in all their gear as well, so it looked pretty good.
Yeah, it looked like a lot of fun.
Now, the wonders of the universe played out against a magical backdrop in Syria this week. We're going all the way around the world.
That's right, from London over to Syria. A time lapse from the ruins of the ancient city of Palmyra shows a Milky Way dancing its way across a star-studded sky.
The footage was filmed in the early hours of Wednesday and Thursday. Wow. Palmyra is one of 6 Syrian sites on the UNESCO World Heritage List that suffered varying degrees of damage during the deadly years-long war there.
Yeah, it was renowned for its 2,000-year-old Roman-era ruins and was dubbed the Bride of the Desert.
Once the capital of an Arab state that was part of the Roman Empire, in the 3rd century, the state briefly broke away and formed its own kingdom.
Yeah, it was also an important stop on the ancient Silk Road, which connected the Roman and the Parthian empires to Asia. So cool. Yeah, the Bride of the Desert. You can see that it has the Roman architecture with the more Eastern flourishes in the close-ups of the design. And I believe it was Queen Zenobia who broke off, and they conquered a bunch of the Roman Empire, but then the Roman emperor specifically targeted her. He captured her and crushed that rebellion, and her whereabouts are somewhat unknown. She was either put down in Rome or she lived in exile, but it's a fascinating section of history. Beautiful architecture, of course, and with those celestial sights, just what a combination.
Sky.
Yeah.
Good to have you with us all here today. We've got to wrap up our show, but be sure to stay tuned for NTD News Today at 10 a.m. Eastern Time coming up. And of course, we'll be back on Monday, actually. So if you're around, stay tuned for us then.
That's right. Spend your Labor Day morning with us. We'll be here at 7 a.m. We got to wrap up now. I'm Carrie Dunn. Thanks for joining us. Have a safe holiday weekend.
And see you soon. I'm Stephanie Cox.
What?